Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you wake up one morning and your body is on fire. Not from flames, from the inside. Your skin burns, but you're freezing. Your head feels like something is squeezing it from both sides. Your muscles ache so badly you can't stand up. Your stomach turns. Your body shakes without you telling it to. And you have absolutely no idea why. You have never heard the word virus. You have never heard the word bacteria. You have no concept of germs, of infection, of immune response, of temperature regulation. Nothing in your entire life has ever explained to you that invisible things too small to see can enter your body and tear it apart from the inside. All you know is this. Yesterday you were fine. Today something is wrong with you. And whatever it is, it doesn't look like anything you have ever seen before. What do you think is happening to you? This moment happened billions of times across hundreds of thousands of years of human history. Every single one of your ancestors faced illness without a single word of explanation. And what they believed, what they did, what they felt in those moments changed the entire course of human civilization. It shaped the first religions. It invented the first surgery. It created the first doctors. It produced some of the most terrifying and fascinating chapters in the whole story of what it means to be human. And scientists, archaeologists, and anthropologists have spent decades piecing together what that experience was actually like. What they found will change how you think about being sick forever. First, let's understand who these people actually were. We have this image of ancient humans as simple, primitive, barely functioning creatures. That image is completely wrong. By the time humans were experiencing illness in any meaningful, self-aware way, somewhere around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, they were cognitively almost identical to you. Same brain size, same emotional capacity, same ability to feel fear, confusion, love, and the desperate need to understand things they couldn't explain. The only difference was knowledge. They knew less, not because they were less intelligent, but because knowledge takes time to accumulate. Thousands of years of trial and error, observation, and written record. They had none of that, so when their body turned against them for the first time, they had only one question. One terrifying, unanswerable question. What is doing this to me? The first answer was almost always, something alive. Think about what illness feels like if you have no explanation for it. Your body is moving without your control, shaking, sweating, cramping, burning. Something inside you is behaving as though it has its own will, as though it wants something, as though it is fighting you from the inside. Your brain, at this point in human history, has a very narrow set of explanations for things that move on their own and cause harm. Animals, other people, and forces you cannot see. The invisible force explanation came almost immediately. Researchers and anthropologists who have studied early human belief systems across every continent on Earth have found the same thing independently, over and over again. Cultures that never had contact with each other, separated by oceans and mountain ranges and thousands of miles, all landed on nearly identical explanations for sickness. Something got inside you. Something that doesn't belong there. A spirit, a force, an entity. Something invisible and hostile that entered your body and is now fighting for control of it. This was not a primitive superstition. This was actually a logical conclusion. These were intelligent people working with the information available to them. They could see that illness came from outside. A person was fine, then they were sick. Something changed. Something entered. The explanation that something invisible and malevolent had entered the body was, given the evidence, genuinely reasonable. And here's the part that stays with you. A 1969 study funded by the National Institute of Mental Health found that spirit possession beliefs existed in 74% of a sample of 488 societies across all parts of the world. Not some, not most. Nearly all of them. Cultures that had never spoken to each other arrived at the same answer. Because the same human brain, looking at the same terrifying experience, kept arriving at the same place. Something got inside me. Something that needs to be driven out. This belief created the first medical system in human history. The shaman. Archaeological evidence suggests shamanic practices emerged as early as the Upper Paleolithic period, over 30,000 years ago. A cave painting in the Trois Frères cave in France, dated to around 13,000 BCE, shows an erect figure with a deer head or mask. Many anthropologists believe this is the earliest known depiction of a shaman. A healer. A person who stood between the world of the living and the world of whatever was making people sick. The shaman was not a fraud. That is the crucial thing to understand. The shaman was the most knowledgeable person in the group about illness and survival. They were the ones who remembered which plants helped which symptoms. They were the ones who performed the ceremonies that, even if they didn't cure the disease, reduced the patient's fear, brought the community together, and created the psychological conditions that actually do improve recovery. Modern medicine calls it the placebo effect. Prehistoric humans called it healing. In Apache society, which anthropologists have studied as a window into prehistoric medical practices, the medicine man would initiate a ceremony over the patient attended by the entire family and community. Magic formulas, prayers, drumming. The medicine man would listen to the patient's history, including any offenses against tribal rules, and from this, determine the nature of the illness and how to treat it. This was not random. This was pattern recognition. Accumulated over thousands of years of observation, passed from shaman to shaman through oral tradition. Some of those patterns were real. A person who ate certain plants got better. A person who rested near water recovered faster. A person whose wound was cleaned with certain earths survived when others didn't. They didn't know why. But they knew that it worked. And they kept doing it. And then there was Ötzi. 5,300 years ago, a man died in the Alps. We know him now as Ötzi the Iceman, discovered frozen in the Italian Alps in 1991. And Ötzi might be the single most important individual in understanding what it was like to be sick as an ancient human, because Ötzi was walking around with an extraordinary number of things wrong with him. He had Lyme disease, the oldest known case ever documented. He had intestinal parasites. He had hardened arteries. He had joint disease in his knees, his hips, and his wrists. His lower back hurt constantly. He was, by any modern measure, a man in significant pain, managing multiple chronic illnesses simultaneously. But here's what is incredible. He was not doing nothing about it. Researchers who examined his belongings found what can only be described as a medical kit. He was carrying birch polypore mushrooms, known today to have anti-parasite properties. He had tinder fungus, which can be used as a wound dressing. He had dried sloe berries, which contain compounds that reduce inflammation. He didn't know the word inflammation. He didn't know the word parasite. But something in the accumulated knowledge of his people, passed down through thousands of years of watching sick people and noting what helped, had landed on the right answers. His kit was, researchers say, curated, deliberate, and deeply informed. He also had tattoos, 59 of them, and the location of almost every single one corresponds precisely to areas of his body where he had joint disease and chronic pain. The same points that acupuncture would later identify and use. This was not decoration. This was treatment. Ötzi was sick. Ötzi was in pain. And Ötzi was doing everything he knew how to do about it. But not every ancient treatment was that gentle. Some of the most astonishing archaeological evidence in the entire history of medicine involves skulls. Specifically, skulls with holes in them. Trepanation, the practice of drilling or scraping a hole through the living human skull, is the oldest documented surgical operation in human history. It dates back at least 7,000 years and has been found on every inhabited continent on Earth. At a burial site in France dated to 6,500 BCE, 40 out of 120 prehistoric skulls showed evidence of the procedure. For years, archaeologists assumed this was a ritual, something done to the dead. Then bioarchaeologists examined the bone more closely, and they found healing. The edges of the holes showed new bone tissue growth, rounded, smoothed-over bone that takes months or even years to look that way. These people had their skulls drilled open, and they survived. Some of them had it done more than once. Why? The answer tells you everything about how ancient humans understood illness. They believed that whatever was inside a sick person, whatever spirit or force was causing the seizures, the migraines, the madness, the uncontrollable shaking, needed a way out. The skull was a container. The illness was trapped inside it. The only logical solution to a mind with no knowledge of neurons or brain chemistry or intracranial pressure was to open the container and let it escape. What they couldn't have known is that in some cases, specifically in cases of head trauma causing internal bleeding and pressure on the brain, this was actually the correct treatment. By drilling a hole to relieve the pressure, they were accidentally performing a procedure that modern neurosurgeons still perform today. They were right, for reasons they couldn't possibly have understood. Here's where it gets even more extraordinary. We tend to think of ancient humans as alone in their suffering, isolated, every person for themselves. The evidence says something completely different. Researchers studying prehistoric skeletal remains have repeatedly found something that should not be possible given the popular image of early humans as brutal survivalists. They find people who survived catastrophic illness and injury for months, sometimes years, in conditions where survival would have been impossible without sustained care from others. Bones broken so severely that walking would have been impossible for 6 months to a year, healed cleanly. Bodies ravaged by infections that would have required constant cleaning and tending to survive. Elderly individuals with severe joint disease who could not have hunted or gathered their own food, clearly cared for until natural death. Someone looked after these people. Someone brought them food. Someone cleaned their wounds. Someone sat with them through the fever. The first response to illness in human history was not abandonment. It was care. Long before there was medicine, long before there was language for what was happening, there was a person sitting next to someone who was suffering, doing everything they could to help. That instinct is at least 300,000 years old, and it is still, today, the most important thing in medicine. Not the drugs, not the machines, not the procedures. The person sitting next to you, refusing to leave. And here is the thing that stays with me. The ancient explanations for illness, the invisible entities, the spirit possession, the forces that entered and needed to be driven out, were wrong about the mechanism. But they were exactly right about the experience. Something does get inside you. Something invisible. Something you didn't ask for. Something that takes control of your body and fights your ability to live normally. Something that needs to be driven out. We now call those things viruses and bacteria. We drive them out with antibiotics and antivirals. But the feeling of being invaded, of your body being hijacked by something that doesn't belong there, of needing something to make it stop, that feeling is ancient. That fear is 300,000 years old. And every time you lie in bed with a fever, shaking and burning and desperate for it to end, wondering what is happening to you, and when it will stop, you are feeling exactly what the first humans felt. The same fear, the same confusion, the same desperate hope that someone will know what to do. We have the same brain, the same experience, separated by hundreds of thousands of years of knowledge that tells us, finally, what's happening. But in the dark, when the fever spikes and the room spins, we run out of that knowledge too. And for just a moment, we understand exactly what it felt like to be the first person who ever got sick, alone with something they couldn't name, hoping someone would come and sit beside them. They always did.